It is time that we address the musical elephant in the room. It is time that we address the musical elephant in the room, and I think you know what I'm talking about. Because if you are like me, if you are a music lover, if you are at least loosely a music commentator, if you are a musician yourself, chances are very good that sometime around February of this year, this being 2026, your personal inbox was suddenly hopping with messages from friends of yours that said something to the effect of, dude, check this out. And then underneath that, there would be a link. And the link said, Angine de Poitrine. And you read that name and you said, what the hell is an angine de poitrine? And then you looked at the thumbnail for that video and you said, what the hell is that? Because on the thumbnail, I'm willing to bet you saw an image of a band, clearly a two-piece band, but a band dressed in polka dots and wearing enormous masks on their heads. And upon the masks were two very long noses, what somebody quipped were schlong noses. If you know, you know. One of the schlong noses being quite obviously erect, the other quite obviously flaccid. And the whole thing looked like an episode of Bizarro Muppets, and you went, what on earth am I looking at? If you're like me, if you fit into any of those categories, you got this message a dozen times, probably in February. And I got it too, and I didn't really look at it. I don't know why I didn't really look at it. I tend not to look at people's musical recommendations a lot of the time. Small confession. I'm not sure why that is. I think most of us are kind of inundated with links and memes from other people, and sometimes they just get lost in the shuffle. I'm guilty of sending those things out too. Anyways, I did not at the time look at the videos that were sent to me several times back in February of this oddity called Angine de Poitrine. And then it kind of went away for me. But then in my travels, they kept kind of popping up. I was seeing a lot of Angine de Poitrine. And you know, if you are a listener to the program, I do love me a costume band. And so at a certain point, I decided I would dip my toe, and I listened to a little bit of Angine de Poitrine. And what did I hear? What indeed? A very, very strange bit of music from this two-piece act dressed in polka dots with huge masks on that were very obviously phallic. Really, really bizarre, weird stuff. Not bad stuff. I didn't say bad stuff. I'm just saying distinctly very weird stuff. And so I listened to it for a little bit. I'm like, yeah, strange that. And then I went back to my life. But over the next few months, it just kept getting more and more and more. I was seeing Angine de Poitrine everywhere I go. Everywhere in the online world, I was just seeing this band, and it was like, very obviously, there's a friggin' buzz happening here about this band, and I'm seeing more and more people talking about them. And then in recent weeks, my Facebook recommendations, the reels, have been just flooded with live footage of Angine de Poitrine. And so it says to me, it's time to address the musical elephant in the room. I have gone 6 months without saying anything about this, but it's so in my face right now that I feel as though it's time that we had the discussion about what is clearly the musical phenomenon of 2026. So what do we know about him? what do we know about Angine de Poitrine? Well, I'm saying that in the best Quebecois accent that I can because they are from Saguenay, Quebec. This much we know. And they are the latest masked, anonymous rock and roll band out there. There's a healthy tradition of that happening these days. We obviously have Ghost. We obviously have Sleep Token. And we know that I like those bands. And we know that I like the ethos of those bands. We know that I like the imagery of those bands. And I enjoy the story element of those bands. Now, we know that Ghost is a bit kitschy and has become more kitschy over time as we have migrated from the original Papas being very satanic and evil and scary into the more recent Lounge Lizard Papas. The show's become very tongue-in-cheek over time, but at least initially, the vibe of Ghost was very serious, very somber, very scary. The whole stage presence, the whole thing was creepy as hell and supposed to be cult-like. And then Sleep Token takes itself very seriously indeed. The costumes are dark and flowy, and the whole stage setup is very dark. The music can be in some ways dark. It's a very serious presentation. Ghost has become campy. Sleep Token is very serious. Angine de Poitrine is, just like I said, like a couple of your favorite Muppets from Bizarro World have come to life. And in fact, they have developed a lore around this band as though they are aliens. Aliens called Angine de Poitrine, that's K-H-N, who is the guitar player / bass player, and Clec de Poitrine, who is the drummer. And they purport to be aliens, 333 years old, very auspicious number, come to Earth to play music that I think you might find on some distant planet in a bar in Star Wars. Because the music is friggin' weird. But the difference I find, not just musically, but in presentation between your Ghosts and your Sleep Tokens and Angine de Poitrine is it's so not serious. In fact, one of my favorite things, maybe my very favorite thing about this whole phenomenon is that Angine de Poitrine began as a joke. This was not supposed to happen. This was not thought out. This was not planned at all. You got these two guys. They are players in Saguenay, Quebec, small city, small scene. And they did something that as a musician, you're not really supposed to do, which is book two shows in the same club in the same week. That is an extreme example of diluting your audience. Normally, you don't recommend your band plays more than once, even in your local market in a month, because you just can't get people to come out if you're playing too much. You saturate the market and you lose the draw. These guys are like, we booked two shows. Nobody's going to come to the second one. So let's pretend we're a completely different band and we'll put on these ridiculous paper mache masks and we'll just present as this oddity. It was done as a complete joke, just to cover over the fact that they had booked two gigs in the same club and they couldn't expect anybody to come if the same name was on the marquee a couple days later. So they did this, and people came and were like, the hell was that? But it started a buzz. This is like 2019, maybe 2020, I guess 2019 before the pandemic. Created a little buzz. And then the pandemic happened, whatever. This band reemerges and begins to develop a following. This oddity that became known as Angine de Poitrine, which translates, it's a French translation of angina pectoris, strangling of the chest. You know when you have an angina attack, a heart attack? That's what Angine de Poitrine means. They're giving you a heart attack, fundamentally. And they develop this buzz. And then the press starts picking up on them. And all of a sudden, this joke performance that this band did starts turning into a thing. And they put out a record in 2024 called Volume 1. and they're playing club shows and people are coming out and the Quebec media is picking them up. And suddenly these guys have been playing together for 20 years in different iterations, and they ditched whatever it was they were doing before, permanently threw themselves into this Angine de Poitrine thing, not having any idea, I don't think, what was coming. But the buzz began to spread kind of far and wide. And so they started getting good bookings. They started getting opportunities in Europe, wherever. They go over to France. They're playing a show, playing a gig in Rennes, France. And then the magic happens, man. The magic happens where this performance is recorded and it is put on YouTube by KEXP. Good old KEXP. And that happened in February of 2026. And within about 10 minutes, every damn one of you had the link in your inbox because this thing went spectacularly viral. Viral in a way that people who want to go viral don't even dream of. As of this morning, this being Tuesday, as of this recording, 18.5 million views of that video on YouTube of a half-an-hour performance by this insane oddity called Angine de Poitrine. And they are an insane oddity, both visually and auditorily. They play such strange, bizarre music. And the foundation of it is that it is microtonal music. What does that mean? I'm not a musical theorist. I'm not great at that. I can give you my basic understanding of it. We here in the West, we have a scale based on semitones. And so you look at the frets on a guitar, and I gather they are semitones. Microtonal music includes the notes between the semitones. They become, I suppose, quarter tones. And so if you look at the guitar bass double neck combo that Angine de Poitrine plays, he's the one with the erect nose. Twice as many frets as your normal guitar, meaning twice as many tones, microtones. And so their riffage, their music is built on these microtones, which is something that I understand is prominent in a lot of Middle Eastern music, in some Japanese music, and these cats are very influenced by those sounds, by those tones. And so instantly, when you listen to this, you hear notes that you're not accustomed to hearing, and you're hearing them played in patterns that you're not accustomed to hearing. It's dissonant. It's very weird. And this is the product of these microtones that are so prominent in the music. There are people who I'm semi-eloquent. I am micro-eloquent. There are people who can deliver a description of this music more eloquently than I. They are fully eloquent. There's an article about them on CBC and described the music as a dizzying, discordant collision of psychedelia, funk, math rock, jazz, and even polka. Which is what it is. This is some of the strangest music that most of us are going to hear if you have been a Zappa fan, if you have been a King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard fan. You've heard kind of bizarre stuff like this before, but they are bringing it into, I guess they are the microtonal revolution. They are the new breed, I suppose, playing this stuff that is very, very weird. But the same CBC article also described them, generally speaking, as delightfully bizarre. This is what separates them visually in terms of vibe from your Ghost, from your Sleep Token. They are bizarro Muppets brought to life. They are objectively hilarious to look at. You just look at them and you're like, objectively, this is a hilarious thing to see. And then the music itself is, as strange as it is, the time signatures are whacked, but it's so ebullient. This is the bit that gets me, is the music is so ebullient. There was an article about them in Noise magazine, which described it as music that is both incredibly elaborate and delightfully funny and lighthearted. And it is. If you're beginning to wonder, or if you're trying to come up with some explanation for why this has taken off to the level that it has, and it really has. I mean, this band is the buzz phenomenon of 2026. They're going around playing giant festivals now. They are headlining shows all over the world. There is an enormous following for this. And you listen to the music and you're like, how can this be? In a world of Olivia's and Taylor's and of pop music like this, which is, for all of its charms, not generally technical or all that challenging to a person's ear. How is this taking off to the level that it is? And I think the answer is simply the ebullience. Now, if you're a musician, you watch these guys play and you're like, these cats are serious players. I'm not messing around. I don't love the music. I'll come straight out and say it. I don't love the music. I will not often listen to the music, but as a musician, I greatly appreciate the music because what they're doing is objectively astounding. Now, you've got two guys. You've got a drummer who's fantastic, and you've got a guitarist slash bass player with a hybrid double neck. It's got a guitar neck, it's got a bass neck, and all of this is built through a looping station. I can't describe in technical terms what looping is. For those of you who aren't really familiar, what a looping station does is it's an apparatus that you plug into and you play something on your bass or your guitar and you click a button and you record that as you're playing it. And then you quite literally loop it. You hit a button and then it just plays whatever you recorded over and over and over again. And then you might loop something else on top of that and something else on top of that, building these layers of things that just keep repeating. And then you play over top of them. That's a huge fundamental part of this band's sound, right? The looping station. And Angine de Poitrine is an absolute master of looping. And this is very difficult to do with a band. You will see a lot of loopers who are solo acts, and it's a clever way of filling out your sound as a solo act to be able to loop different parts together, and it gets bigger and you've got more sounds happening. You can loop vocal harmonies on top of each other. Our great friend Danny Gauthier is a master of that. Works really, really well as a solo performer. Very difficult to do, though, in a band situation where everybody's got to stay in time with the loop. Sometimes you can't hear the loop all that well, or whatever. The loop gets lost in kind of all of the other music that's happening. And if you get off the loop, you're effed, man. If you get off the loop, then the time is all shot and everybody's looking around like who's where and who's what. And somebody's got to scramble to shut the loop off. Very, very difficult to do this. Even with a simple loop, it's very, very difficult for the band to stay with that, especially if you're not playing on a click track together. These guys have built their sound around incredibly intricate looping in the most bizarre, whacked out time signatures. It's really bloody impressive. Even if you don't enjoy the music, watch and appreciate for the sheer technical ability. They're both fantastic players. Drummer is a terrific drummer. Guitar player, I mean, it's hard to say for me because he's playing microtonal and it's all friggin' weird, but it's very obvious that this cat is a player. And then when you add in the dexterity, the complexity, the sheer intricacy of the looping, bloody impressive. And then in all of those whacked out time signatures, and they pull it off seamlessly. I mean, this is high level stuff. Whether you listen to the music, which is very avant-garde, very strange, you listen to it and think this is just kind of weirdly calculated noise, appreciate how tight they are with that calculated noise. And there's one song that I particularly enjoy. It's called Fabienk, Fabienk, and it's like a 6.5 minute song. The first 3 minutes of it are just weird. But then the second half of the song, they drop into kind of a pocket. And it's a similar effect for me as when I listen to Tool, because Tool, another band that plays very odd time signatures, very intricate, very complex, very impressive music, challenging music. And you listen to that and you're like, this is amazing. But once in a while, Tool will come out of that intricacy and drop into a groove that makes sense musically, might even be in 4/4, and they'll just hammer on a riff in 4/4. And after all of this intricacy, when they drop into a groove like that you can really feel and understand, it really hits like a truck, and then you just start moving, right? So it is with this song Fabienque, where they play through the first half of the song, which is cool and weird, but then in the second half, they drop into something approximating a groove that makes a certain amount of sense, and it's deep, man. It is a deep, funky pocket. It's not 4/4. I've seen it variously counted in 28, in 14, and in 7. When I can catch one at all during this section, I tend to count it in 14. But that gives you enough beats to feel like it's in 4/4, and 4/4 is what we dance to, kids, all right? So if you're counting it in 28, you've got like a solid run of beats that feel like 4/4, and it feels like a groove you understand, and then it kicks in, and over the next 3 minutes, they just riff off of that groove, but it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. They're digging in harder and harder and harder, and it smokes. Gotta be honest, it smokes. Like Rick Beato played a little bit of that on his channel, and he's like, oh yeah, man, it's like there's some deep pocket happening on some of this stuff, but the fact that they're holding all this together, that deep pocket is in 28, kids. These are complex riffs. These are complex time signatures. And if you can separate the image, whatever, the silly costumes, and just listen to the music, you're like, wow, man, this is deep. Like, this is intense, some of this stuff. But it's weird. But the whole thing works. The whole thing works because it is so delightfully odd and ebullient. They look hilarious, and when they're playing, it's like these two weird puppets digging in for all they got, digging in hard on this stuff, you know what I mean? And they are obviously, even though they have no expressions on their face, they're obviously having such a good time, and they don't talk to the audience. They don't talk to the audience. They communicate only with each other on stage, and not in English, through weird alien blips and growls and clicks, digital sorts of sounds, and stuff lights up, and they do this triangle hand signal, which has become the thing now. Like, they step out on stage, and 30, 50, 70,000 people have the triangle up in the air. It's become this weird phenomenon. It's another one where it probably doesn't work without the image, right? It probably doesn't work as well. It doesn't capture the imagination without the image, without the weird masks, without the polka dots, without the whole thing. Like, you show up at the Angine de Poitrine show, this is only something that you've seen kind of on YouTube, but it's a world, right? It's a world. And then you show up at the show and you see the polka dots and you see the instruments and you're like, I'm in the world. And then these characters come out and it's this world you've been watching kind of come to life. And I have a theory about why this works. And I've expressed this theory before in terms of Ghost, in terms of Sleep Token, and it's like superheroes. Or if nothing else, on a lesser level, the world is so effed up right now, and real reality is for so many people so bloody harsh and despondent and feels kind of dark and hopeless. Here's this opportunity to step into another world. They describe themselves as aliens. It's like we're stepping into an alien universe, which is fun and weird and screwy. And you can kind of let yourself go into this world. And I think the appeal is largely that. I don't even know if most of the people who love this band even like the music all that much. They just love these characters, these dorky, weird aliens that are bouncing around playing this music. They overlook how freaking amazing the players are. They like the spectacle. They like stepping into another world when our real world feels so dark and awful. Let's step into this weird oddity of a world, a Pixar movie of a world where these cats are playing for all they're worth, bouncing up and down with their schlong noses. I think that's the appeal. But it works because, A, they're so good. Same as Steel Panther, right? That whole thing works because they're so good. And then the chops deliver. and they present so happy, so bloody happy. And it's a really interesting thing. The band, when they do interviews on camera, they don't speak English. They speak alien. They speak gibberish, digital clicks, and they have like an interpreter who says what they mean. But when they do off-screen interviews, they actually do real interviews, like real people, where they talk about the music and the influences and whatever. And there's a quote that they gave that is very, very helpful for us on this podcast right now, where they describe themselves as a, quote, mantra rock Dada Pythago-Cubist orchestra. That's going to be tough to put on your business card. But for us, it provides what I love so much in an episode, which is a rabbit hole to go down. Because they describe themselves as Dada, as Dadaists. This music is Dada. And you say, what the hell is Dada? And that is a wonderful historical artistic rabbit hole to go down. The Dada movement, or Dadaism, is initially an artistic movement, also a philosophical movement that popped up in Zurich, Switzerland in the year 1916. Now, you historians out there, what's going on in the world in 1916? Anybody? Anybody want to shout it out? The First World War is happening in Europe in 1916. And if you are a listener to this program, you know the First World War is my historical hobby horse. I have talked about it a lot on this program. I have talked a lot about the artistic movements that came before and after it. I've talked about how everything changed. It was the end of a world, the First World War. Huge wars like that tend to end worlds. 1916, the First World War is in its third year, and it is raging in ways that we can't really understand. We have an objective 100 years later view of the First World War. We can agree between us, those of us who think about it at all, that it was pretty awful. Not a great place, not a great thing to experience, the Western Front in 1916. But we have no concept. We have no real concept, right? I have spent a lot of time reading about this war, listening about this war, contemplating this war. I have stood in the preserved trenches at Vimy, at Beaumont Hamel. I have been to some of the sites. I have been to Tynecott Cemetery on the edges of Passchendaele. I've put myself there, but I have no concept of what it was like to actually experience that war. It was our first go. The First World War was, up until that point, the most psychotic thing we'd come up with yet. Our first go for real at modern industrial warfare. And it was a nightmare on a level that very, very few people could have anticipated. And we can't understand now. But being in that war was a nightmare beyond my description. I can't describe what it was like to actually experience being in the line, being a soldier in that war. It was a horror beyond anything I can describe here right now. It was awful, and it was not just awful for the frontline soldier. It was awful for the people on the home front. We're talking 10 to 15 million soldiers were killed in this conflict, all right? Everybody in the combatant countries, everybody in France, England, Russia, Italy, Austria, Germany, obviously, Canada, everybody lost someone, or at least knew somebody who lost someone. Now, there were villages in England where almost every kid in the village was killed, and they were all killed more or less on the same day because they had what was called PALS battalions. When they were recruiting, when they were not conscripting, at least not yet, when they were recruiting volunteers and they came in their thousands to sign up for the war effort, a lot of those kids were, and they were kids, a lot of them signed up together in what they called PALS battalions. The idea was, if you sign up with your buddies, you'll all go together. It'll be an adventure. You'll have a great time. Easier to get volunteers that way. And we'll put you all together in the same unit, in the same line, and you can serve with your pals. And that was a way of making the whole prospect maybe a little bit easier, maybe a little bit more exciting, maybe a little more fun. Problem with the Pals Battalion is that 40 kids from your village go together, and by the time they got the volunteers trained and ready, it was kind of 1916. They were going to embark on what became known as the Battle of the Somme. And the Pals Battalions, all these volunteers, the flower of English youth, they walk out into the battlefield and get killed altogether. And so the whole town was devastated. Everybody lost somebody, maybe multiple people. And so this went on all over all of the combatant countries. Everybody lost somebody. And by the hundreds of thousands, possibly by the millions, men were just gone. Gone. You go to a First World War cemetery, and a vast majority of the stones will say a soldier of, let's say, because I went to the British cemeteries, a soldier of the British Army or a soldier of the Great War, known unto God. We got a piece of a guy here. We don't know who he is, but we put his leg in here and he's known unto God. And that's just the bits they found of people. I know this is macabre, but there's a point. By the millions, men were just lost, just gone, blown to smithereens, buried someplace, grave got blown up. They're just gone. There's no trace of them. So you're a person back home and your kid is listed as MIA, missing in action, and you just never heard from them again. Remains were never found. You have no idea what happened. And you live the rest of your damn life with that. This is going on. And particularly in 1916, it's bad because the Battle of the Somme happens. The Battle of Verdun happens. These are humanity gone absolutely stark raving mad. I describe World War I as the world gone mad. World War II as the world on fire. In World War I, they had gone mad. By the millions, men are killing each other. Graves, corpses are stacking up. It's an horrendous nightmare, the likes of which I can't possibly describe. I can't possibly understand. It was humanity gone completely mad. And so what happens? A lot of people are like, I want no part of this. This is awful. I'm getting out of here. A lot of artists were like that. The art world had been based in Paris. It had been based in Berlin. And a lot of people are like, I'm not taking no part in this. They started to split. And they needed to go somewhere where the war was not happening. And that turned out to be neutral Switzerland. And so you begin to get artists filtering in from Germany, from France, from other parts of Europe that are at war. And they're gathering in Zurich, Switzerland. Switzerland is neutral. It's away from the war. Let's all meet there. So there becomes this growing artist community, 1916, in Switzerland. And most of them, rational people, are coming in and they're looking at each other and saying, what the F, what the actual F is going on here? Right? The Battle of the Somme is kicked off. The Battle of Verdun is kicked off. The meat grinder, the horror show of Verdun. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people are being killed in these pointless battles that accomplish virtually nothing. Just fighting for years over the same 100 yards of space. Killing each other in the millions. And the artists gathering in Zurich are like, this is psychotic. We've lost our way. And they were utterly disillusioned with the structure of society entirely. They looked around and said, what the actual F is happening and who's responsible? And the consensus was responsibility lay with the bourgeoisie, the people with money, the people with power who are making this war happening and sending everybody's kids off to be killed while they rake in the money and keep all the power. This power game for these rich elites. Does any of this sound familiar, by the way? Does any of this sound relevant to right now? The bourgeoisie is to blame for this. And not just the bourgeoisie, but a complacent, apathetic society that allows this to happen and does nothing about it. And all of the institutions that we have put our faith in for all of these years, churches, governments, institutions of all sorts, are responsible for this, because all of these traditions, all of these conventions of society have led us here to this charnel house of a war that is mad and horrifying beyond any description even the poets of the time could give it. Really? Well, that's not true. Wilfred Owen, Robert Graves described it pretty well. Point being, this is a nightmare of unimaginable horror, ferocity, and scale. And these artists gathering in Zurich are like, somebody has to be held responsible for this. And it's everything. Primarily the bourgeoisie, complacent people who are willing to die for these weird conventions without thinking, and all of the institutions that have propped this up. And we reject all of it. We reject all of it. One of the leaders of the Dada movement in Switzerland, an artist called Marcel Janko, gave a pretty good quote where he said, "We had lost confidence in our culture. Everything had to be demolished. At the Cabaret Voltaire, which I'll talk about in a minute, we began by shocking common sense, public opinion, education, institutions, museums, good taste. In short, the whole prevailing order." These artists were gathering saying everything that we've been led to believe in so far is a complete lie. And it leads to this unimaginable destruction, and we reject all of it. So you had cats coming in like Hugo Ball and Emmy Hennings, poets, writers, artists, gathering here. And Hugo Ball and Emmy Hennings opened up what they called the Cabaret Voltaire, named after the philosopher Voltaire, whose famous work Candide was a slap in the face to the religious and cultural mores of the time, a revolutionary document, a critical document. We're opening up the Cabaret Voltaire as our own critical document. And every night at the cabaret, they just had increasingly insane performances. People coming in and just banging atonally on pianos, or people coming in and giving poetry readings of poetry that was complete gibberish, and these gonzo public performance pieces, theater pieces, this insane, shocking cabaret of psychotic artwork. And all of it was established as a poke in the face to all of the conventions that got there, not just the political ones, not just the social ones, not just the religious ones, but in fact, including the artistic ones. They developed what they described, or has been described, as anti-art. All of the artistic conventions were flipping them on their ear. Everything that we've been taught so far is art, is good art, is true artistic expression. It's all contributed to this mass psychosis called the First World War. We reject all of it. And so the musical performances are psycho. The poetry recitations are gibberish. The art that they create, they got focused in on creating collages, photo collages, pieces of art that were cobbled together by clipping out bits of magazine and newspaper, and in some cases just dropping it willy-nilly onto a page. You're like, this is art. If the world is psychotic, we're going to be psychotic, and we call this art. Even if it was nuts. And a lot of what they produced reminds me a little bit of Terry Gilliam's animation in Monty Python. Just random, absurd, really, really funny in his case. And a lot of it looked like that. These collages, whatever. There was a cat. This spread, right? So there's a gathering of artists from all over the place in Switzerland throughout the war. After the war, they begin to disperse. People go to Berlin. People go to Paris. People go to New York. And they carry these Dada ideas with them. And if you're wondering what Dada means or where it comes from, nobody quite knows. There are differing opinions on what the Dada thing is. But it itself sounds absurdist and like gibberish. And so they adopted that, this Dada principles of this psychotic anti-art, which is a fly in the face of all artistic conventions. There's a cat in New York called Marcel Duchamp, and he does sculpture, he does art, and he submits to an art installation one of the most famous pieces of Dada sculpture, which is called Fountain. And what it is Duchamp went and he got his hands on a urinal and he put the urinal sideways on a pedestal and said, there's my piece of art, Fountain. It's what they called ready-made art. So that's making art of objects that already exist just by turning them sideways or upside down. A different interpretation of what this object is. And it's like, that's art. The world is freaking crazy. This is crazy. This is art. And it was kind of blasphemous. You know, the traditional art circles are looking at all of this stuff like it's a kind of a blasphemy. And they're like, that's the point. Your war is a blasphemy. All of the institutions, all of the conventions that we've grown up in that produce this are a blasphemy. So we're anti all of it. And that was the Dada movement. All of this really bizarre, weird anti-art as a protest against all of the convention. And so there was a lot of this going on. I mean, the Dada movement wasn't the first sort of avant-garde art thing to have. There's a lot of this going on. Late 1800s, Eiffel Tower was in some weird way an avant-garde thing. And people hated it, by the way. And then through the 1900s up to the war, you had Cubism, which Angine de Poitrine referenced Cubism as part of their inspiration. That's Picasso. That's Georges Braque. These artists who developed a whole new style of art that became called, as the result of an insult, Cubism, where normally a painting would be a perspective on a thing or a scene or whatever. And the Cubists like Picasso came along and they're like, we want to see different perspectives on the thing. And so you get them creating geometric shapes and patterns and reflecting a person or a thing in this really odd way with different perspectives all in one shot. And then as Cubism developed, it became more and more and more abstracted to the point where you hardly knew what it was you were looking at. Just that the art was strange. This was very avant-garde at the time. You'll recall my episode Riot at the Ballet from a few years ago, where I talked about Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring, which in 1913 caused a riot in Paris when it debuted because the music was atonal. The music was so weird, and the choreography by Nijinsky was so bizarre that people lost their friggin' minds. There was a lot of quote-unquote progress happening, a lot of people pushing the boundaries, and the Dada people pushed it too in their way, but with a pretty distinct social commentary attached to it, an anger attached to it. We're making a mockery, like Voltaire and Candide. We're making a mockery of your conventions. All of them, including the artistic ones that are the foundation of who we are as artists. We're turning it all on its ear. That was the Dada movement, and it petered out into the 20s, but it birthed surrealism. Dali comes along. It was an inspiration, along with Cubism, to a lot of the stuff that came after it that became more and more strange, more and more surreal, more and more avant-garde. It finds its roots here in this movement and in this time. And so I find it a fun rabbit hole to go down with reference to Angine de Poitrine. But I don't think those cats came along and said, we're doing a political statement here. I think part of the charm of Angine de Poitrine is that it's not a political statement. They are drawing on inspiration from the Dada people who were very much political, but I don't think that's what they're doing. I think, and this is my favorite part of it, I think this is just a weird, wacky, happy frigging accident. And I don't know what kind of shelf life it's going to have. I don't know how long it's going to last. The thing about it is the novelty is hot right now. Does the novelty persist, or are they going to, at some point, going to have to evolve? You know, Ghost went through this evolution from scary into more campy, and along the way started headlining arenas. So, you know, that worked. In 5 years, can Angine de Poitrine show up wearing the same costumes with the same polka dots, playing the same sort of music? I don't know, possibly. Doesn't really matter for our purposes. The point is, I love that it was an accident. I find that so bloody inspiring. They didn't set out to do this weird thing and hope somehow that they were going to get 18 million views on KEXP. Nobody would have that ambition. You'd be insane to think that was possible. It's not what they did. They had a weird idea. They had a weird idea as a joke, and they followed it. And they were doing serious projects. They were serious musicians playing little clubs in Saguenay. All of a sudden, they do this psychotic thing, which was fun, which on some level must have been inspired. And it gets picked up and takes off like friggin' wildfire. And I just love that as an illustration that you shouldn't say no to your weird impulses. That's the point of all of this. You shouldn't say no to your weird impulses. That thing that comes to you like a lightning bolt that is not what you normally do, not what you would normally try, not like you at all. And for that reason, you don't do it. That song you're working on that is not your traditional style, you're like, that's not going to work with my band. It's not going to work with my whatever. It's not my vibe. It's not my idiom. Don't push that away. Or that job that you wouldn't normally take, or that creative project that came to you out of nowhere is like, I don't write films. Write the film. Write the film. Write the song. Play the song. Apply for the job. Whatever it is. I'm so intrigued and inspired by just the sheer synchronicity of it all. This is what I'm saying. That weird little idea you've got, don't push it away. Do it. Try it. These weird little ideas come to you for reasons, man, and we tend to push away any thought that doesn't fit in the box. Well, I'm a folk singer. I write folk songs, and I know I've got a riff in my head right now that is a pure hair metal riff, but that's not what I do. That's not who I am, so let's push that away. Don't push that away. Write that song. Write that song, and then you're like, this is kind of a cool song, and then play it for somebody like, that's kind of a cool song, and then a bunch of people are like, I want to be in that band, and then all of a sudden, you're in this weird hair metal band that's taking off. Don't ignore those intuitions. Don't ignore those little impulses to do the weird thing that you think can't work, or the weird thing that isn't quote unquote you. I'm a serious novelist. I don't write absurdist fantasies. But you got one in your mind, don't you? Write it. Write it, because these are little nudges from the universe. These are weird little nudges that push you, especially if you're struggling, push you into creative potential and opportunities that you wouldn't have guessed even existed. When the two members of Angine de Poitrine said, we got to do something different for that second gig. Let's put these goofy masks on. I don't think they had in mind 18 million views on KEXP, opening for Jack White, or playing to 70,000 people at Montreal Jazz Festival. They just followed that weird little intuition, that weird little joke. The universe loves a wink, man. The universe loves a sly wink, a sly joke, that it blossoms into success beyond your wildest frigging imagination. That is the point. The Dada thing is a fun rabbit hole. Angine de Poitrine is a fun rabbit hole. But the point is, pay attention to those nudges. Pay attention to that weird thing that you think there's just no way. Because there's something in that. Because you didn't think of it. You didn't think of it. It was given to you. And I think as creatives, we have an obligation to those weird little things that are given to us. So take your inspiration from the polka dots of Angine de Poitrine, which I maintain is blowing up because it is so ebullient and fun and weird and such an escape. And kudos to them, whether you like the music or not. Amazing players doing something very interesting. and blowing up with it. And who's going to begrudge them that? Not me. And I think I'd kind of like to see them live at some point in time. I think that would be very, very interesting. If you haven't checked them out, they're all over Spotify, of course. Fabienk, F-A-B-I-E-N-K, is the song I like best. But if you want the ground floor experience, I suppose, go watch the KEXP performance. It's like half an hour. And now there's a ton of live footage of them playing this year because they're playing everywhere. And so there's a lot of footage online. They are so friggin' tight. Playing in very complex music, very weird time signatures, on a looper, and just not missing a beat, just crushing it. Very, very musically impressive, technically very impressive, great players doing a weird thing. And for crying out loud, don't we need a little bit of whimsy right now? Told myself this was going to be 40 minutes and I blew it. So if you listened this far, I do very much want to thank you. I want to thank you for your encouragement. I want to thank you for your support. I want to remind you that good things happen when you put yourself out there in a giant mask with an obvious phallus on your face. Good things happen when you put yourself out there like that, kids. So go be inspired by the weird little ideas you have. Play with them this week. See what happens. You never quite know if it's just going to take off in some weird way that all of the art that you've been grinding yourself against has not. Hope you're enjoying your summer. Have a great rest of it. I was going to take the rest of August off, and then this thing just popped up and I took it. I may or may not be back with something next week, but if I'm not, it won't be long. Until then, listen to Angine de Poitrine and do take care.